Great. Wonderful. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today's session is about the new ASISTS redesign, which we have been working on sort of in the background during COVID. And we are, I would say, we are 80% of the way there. But as many of you know, the first 80%, that's sort of like the easy part. So maybe we're 90% of the way there. And the first 80% is the easy part, and the last 20 are the little details and nuances that we're still working through. So for those of you who I have not met before, which I was looking at I closed the participants window. I've left my chat window open, but I have asked Amy to keep an eye on that because it's hard for me to bounce back and forth. But so I'm not 100% sure everybody who's in this room, I recognize most of the names, but for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Kate Tornese. I am the Associate Director of ASISTS and Data Services with the Literacy Assistance Center. And we, like you, have a contract with State Ed. Our contract is to manage, modify, troubleshoot, tech support, all that for ASISTS and your NRS and NYRS data as the year goes on. And so, as I said, today we're going to be doing a demo of the ASISTS redesign. It's still got a couple little rough edges, so just expect that for today, but we've got some really wonderful new features that we want to show you. Some places where you'll just see that things haven't changed all that much, and some places where we've changed things pretty dramatically, and we hope that you like them. So I'm going to be logging in today to our practice data. You'll notice that the vast majority of the data on the login screen hasn't changed. We still consider this important information, even for those people who might not have access to ASISTS, but might need these links, whether they be the links to training, the links to news bulletins, or the links to our partner agencies or our state education department. So we didn't want to take those away. So I'm going to log in. As I said, I'm going to be connected to our practice data. So the numbers don't look that great. But the first thing that you will see is a completely redesigned landing page for our the first place that you land when you go into ASISTS. And one of the biggest changes that we wanted to make was we wanted to give you the major statistics that you would be interested in right off the bat in a really easy to use, friendly manner. And so we've designed these, we call them index cards, that have your basic statistics on them. And depending upon what funding streams you get, some of these will have more information on them than others. But we've given you general information about how many classes you have running, how many students you have enrolled overall, how many students are active in the system, how many students you have active but wouldn't expect to see on a report yet because they have fewer than 12 hours. How many students are on your NRS or NYRS report and are still missing a pre-test? How many are missing a post-test? How many are what sort of measurable skills gain percentage are you seeing? And how does that compare to the state average measurable skills gain at this time? What sort of NYRS percentage do you have? For this agency, they don't have any percentage in NYRS. So you see that kind of stays blank there a little bit. And then finally, like a overall total of EPI claim hours if your agency was EPI funded. So these are quick statistics, and you'll notice that each one of them has a link that will be functional when we get to that point to take you directly to a report that has something to do with that statistic to help you figure out where that statistic is coming from. The other major change we made to the first thing you see is that we've moved the menu to the sidebar to give as much real estate as possible to data entry and reporting screens. So this menu, like many menus you're probably familiar with, it collapses down into the sidebar so that you don't have to have that open all the time. And some of those screens that we will be looking at, especially those having to do with students or instructional offerings where there's a lot of data, we've tried to utilize this expanded real estate a little bit more efficiently. Across the top, there are or will be quick links to add a brand new student, to go to classes and add attendance, a quick link to the program evaluation report for your WIOA NRS and for your NYRS, which I know those program managers who are up really early, and the first thing they do every morning, probably even before coffee, is check their program evaluation report. And I know that because I get the emails when something's not working properly, and they're like time stamped at 6-something a.m. We've got a real quick way for you to get to those major reports that you're probably looking at daily. So we're going to get started right away. We haven't moved things into different categories. We've kept the same categories that you're familiar with in ASISTS, but most of the screens have changed primarily to focus on the pieces that we know you're most interested in, or that state ed is most interested in, and put that information, what we call above the fold, so that you don't have to scroll down to it, and put the less important information below the fold. If we go to our agency information screens, you'll also notice that we've taken away things like save and delete buttons on the screen, and instead we've made it so that each section is clickable, and then you can make edits to that section if you need to make edits to it. You'll see this pattern repeated throughout ASISTS, where we've got various categories of data, which we've always had. We've always sort of compartmentalized data in ASISTS by category. And in this case, we've made it so the entire section of a category is the button to click to then make changes or close without saving those changes. The other interface change we've made is that where you are expected to add an entire new record in a lot of cases, instead of clicking add new, we've put those key fields right at the top. So instead of being able to, or having to click add new, getting a pop-up, adding what you want, and then clicking save, if it is a place where the record has set key fields or a set smaller number of fields, we've moved that right to the top of the screen, where you can add a new record right from there and click add, and it will go right in without having to move on to other pieces. We see that in the agency funding source information. We see that in site information, and referral partners works pretty much like site, so I'm not going to show it, but we also see that in adding a new literacy zone or non-NRS outcome. We're still working on exactly the phrasing for this, but these outcomes are based on the literacy zone outcomes that many literacy zones have been using for many years. When state ed starts mandating that people start using the case manager portal, these will be basically the case management outcomes. So we've got the WIOA NRS or NYACCE outcomes, the ones that are specifically targeted to employment or HSE, et cetera. And then these are the more everyday outcomes, and the ones that we have probably put into proposals specifically as ones that we want to work on with our students. Those of you who are already familiar with the literacy zone agency specific outcomes screen, you know that it is not organized at this point. It's really just all of the ones that you've ever put in. And so one of the changes that we made here was to organize them by category. And if you select the category from the drop down, ASISTS will filter the screen and show you all of the outcomes in that category. And I saw a chat question. This is not under sites. This is in your agency information screen, and it's the last tab across the top. Currently, it's also in your current ASISTS system listed as literacy zone outcomes. Still in agency information, just listed slightly differently. And as I said, it's not filterable in current ASISTS, so it would be more difficult to use. So this would be, you know, run child, and you could add that. Hopefully that works for me. But it would then add those outcomes to the list. Give me problems. So what we'll see as we go through is you'll see the places where we will click an entire section to make edits or be able to add an item from the top menu. This side menu does disappear whenever we are on a data entry screen. And so to open it, we just click the hamburger menu and we can then make our next selection. Another screen where we've made some significant changes is to personnel records. In this case, if you wish to add a new personnel record, we've sort of hidden that little add new interface. But if you click, you'll get what we currently refer to as the threshold information, the basic information that you need to get a personnel record started, except instead of opening up a whole new screen, it will open right on the screen here, and you'll be able to begin a personnel record. I'm going to go ahead and look up an existing personnel record. The filters work similarly to the ones that are in ASISTS currently, where if you start typing a name, it will give you a drop-down menu of all of the people who meet that criteria. In this case, rather than creating a drop-down, we've just gone ahead and filtered the whole screen by whoever meets that criteria. And to get into one of those records, this is another place where we're going to click that whole line anywhere on the line, not just the info button like it is in ASISTS now, but if we click anywhere on that line, then ASISTS will open up that personnel record. The major change to personnel records is that, again, this is one of those ideas where we've moved the important stuff above the fold and kept the less important stuff below the fold. For the most part, we don't spend a lot of time in our personnel records, but what is most important to us and most important to state ed when we're looking into a personnel record is, does that record have everything that it needs to be an active record, so that it will appear, so that that name will appear either when the RAIN goes to assign that person to a staff development opportunity, or when we go to assign that person as a primary instructor to one of our classes. And so the key pieces for counting or appearing in either of those cases are now right at the top of the screen, so that you have the time and the experience question filled in, which, if this is a newer record, is going to have it filled in because it's a required field during the threshold process. But if it's an older record or someone who might be returning to you after being gone for a long time, that might be missing. And we have the certification information and active status right at the top of the screen. Additionally, we have the staff person's professional development history listed, as well as a total of professional development hours in RAIN approved trainings for the current fiscal year. So you would be able to very easily go into a personnel record, see what their total is for the current fiscal year, see have they met that 14-hour minimum for the staff development for the current fiscal year, or do they still have to attend things? Are they getting credit for everything that they attended? And if not, is it because they don't have their active status at the top of the screen? And so the RAIN is unable to assign their professional development hours, etc. It's all right at the top of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, you have the same fields that we still have in ASISTS for personnel records, ones that are useful, but are not usually the ones that we're focused on when we're coming in to make changes to our ASISTS records. So you've got, if the teacher has instructional hours entered for classes, those instructional hours will appear here. If they have non-instructional hours that you want to track, that will appear here. If you have an address for them, either a home address or work address or both, demographic information for your personnel records, and then any notes that you might have for that person's record. This all is optional information, right? Everything in the personnel record below that top section is information that, depending upon what kind of agency you are, you may have an HR department who has that in a database, or other ways of tracking that information. It might not be information that you need to have an ASIST or want to have an ASIST, so it's all optional. But this top section is what you would be most interested in when looking at a personnel record. We've moved it to the top. I'm going to keep going because we do only have an hour and 15 minutes. Some of you on the call, I'm sure, either add your own staff development, or we might even have some RAIN directors on the call. So I am going to briefly talk about the staff development section. The staff development section has been revamped. Again, we see that you can add a brand new event up at the top. If you are a RAIN, then that event becomes a RAIN valid event, and anybody who attends it gets credit for state ed professional development. If you are not a RAIN, you could still track internal professional development if you wanted to, recognizing the fact that it's not going to count towards the official hours for your staff. But those agencies that do choose to put in, or RAINs who need to put in staff development, what you'll see is that we've added filters so that these professional development activities can be listed by fiscal year. Do we have any for 2022? Maybe not. They can be listed by category, or they can be listed by location, provider, etc. My screen. And these categories are going to filter depending upon what is in the database. So here we've got everything that's been labeled as a data or ASISTS training. We could do everything that's Common Core related, etc. Again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because this is one of those places where regular agencies, those of us who are providers, don't necessarily use this screen very much, but I am hoping that the RAIN directors and those that are tracking staff development will like the changes we've made there. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is adding a brand new student or editing an existing student record. Editing an existing student record, the lookup works pretty much exactly the same way. And we're going to get to that, but we're actually going to approach this from a different perspective, because probably the most functional change that we have made in ASISTS is that we have made it so that a a potential duplicate is going to be called to your attention through the process of the individual student record form entry. So the first thing I'll point out is that we have redesigned this add new student screen to follow the ISRF pretty consistently. Like maybe things are slightly scooched one way or the other, but for the most part, this is going to follow the ISRF from top to bottom. Entering a brand new student is going to take you through this whole page, going right down your ISRF, pretty much in order. So hopefully, you know, our reasoning here was a brand new person, a brand new staff person who's tasked with entering a new ISRF shouldn't have to hunt and peck for what they're trying to put in from the ISRF. And while the current ASISTS screen did, for the most part, follow the ISRF, it wasn't laid out in the same way. But the biggest change that we've made is that if you enter a potentially duplicate student, meaning the first few letters of the first name, the first few letters of the last name, and the date of birth, match someone who is in the system already, ASIST is going to call that to your attention. And this pop-up is going to show you any record, could be multiples. In this case, in my practice database, there's only one. But if you have multiple students with very similar names and a date of birth is the same, ASIST is going to call that to your attention. And you can either say, no, this is actually a brand new person, and you can continue with the data entry, or you can click that item and ASIST is going to take you directly to the student's profile screen. So the student's profile screen is another big change that we've made to ASIST, where we've taken all of the key pieces of information about that student and summarized them on one screen. So if you take a look, this student is technically currently active in my database, but they are not currently counting for NRS, see on the sides. But the left-hand side comes from the student's demographic information, where we've got their contact information, their key demographics of gender, ethnicity, and employment status, and their population categories or barriers to employment, barriers to learning, that are all from their main contact information screen on the left-hand side. And the right-hand side is processed information. So when entering a brand new student, you wouldn't expect to have anything on this left-hand side. But when a student has, you know, started accumulating contact hours and enrolled in classes, and they have test scores and things like that, then you'll start to see information on the left-hand side of the screen, including which assessments are the student's assessments of record. So this is going to be the first screen you come to whenever you go to edit a new student. And if you want to look at another student, or let's say you want to look at where these pieces are coming from, you can click on that tile and ASIST is going to take you to the tab of the student's information where that particular piece of information comes from. So again, we've got a summary screen and then a shortcut to each of the pieces that you would have on that summary screen, including details, assessment, enrollments, etc. I actually want to go ahead and go back to look up a different student who is actually counting in my practice data, but counting on reports, so that you can see where ASIST puts that on that right-hand side. So I'm going back to just look up another student. I could do that. I use the student search shortcut from the upper left-hand side, which I'll show you again in just a second, or I could have gone to the menu and gone back to edit student. That's going to take me to this exact same place. but I'm going to look up one of the students who I have served this year. And again, first place we land is the profile screen. And in this case, this student is actually counting on my practice databases NRS report. And you see up at the top, this student is counting for EPI and WIOA, Title II. We see that they had enrollments in a class this year, classes, and the contact hours are summarized there. Duplication there, which is just one of our, again, one of that 10% we're still working on. But you see that the student's pre-test record is indicated for the current fiscal year, and their last month of attendance is indicated. So again, we've got lots of information here, and if you wanted to look at any of these details, we could go to those tabs either via the shortcut or via the tabs across the top. So we took a quick look at student details. Here I will again point out this is where we click to edit any of these pieces of information, where we can make changes to a student's information if necessary, add various pieces of information, add a barrier to learning that we find out about that student, or any of those pieces that we find out over the course of the year. I've got this zoomed in a little bit because otherwise it's kind of hard to see on Zoom. So the spacing is not quite right on my screen, but you see that we've got, even though it's not exactly where those pieces are on the ISRF, we have still put the major pieces that we would be most interested in at the top. We've got our contact information, our key demographic information, our funding sources, our employment information, all of that, again, above the fold so that you don't necessarily have to scroll. And that's even if you couldn't find what you needed right on that profile page, which you probably would. We have tried to compact some of the other screens so that we don't have to dig basically for various pieces of information. So the student's assessment screen has layers of information, and we will see where we can add a brand new record or expand what test history a student might have in the system. And this pop-up is going to be very familiar in terms of the data that you need to enter. We haven't changed any of those required fields in that sense, but we do have that pop up, and then again, we're trying to make this as compact as possible, as easy to read as possible. And it doesn't want to refresh for me. There we go. Okay. The enrollment tab is similar. This one's giving me a glitch today, but you can see that we've got both case management and enrollment up at the top. And any records that a student has either in their educational classes or case management are going to be listed similarly to the assessment screen, where we've got a list and editable in a similar way. And then we've got the contact hours summary for the current fiscal year and a contact hours history for any prior fiscal year, as well as the comments field that has been there for on the enrollment tab for a long time. And because this screen right here is glitchy, I've just got to go back out, come back to Luis. And I want to show you our goals and outcomes. Because again, we're trying to make things compact where you don't have to do a lot of scrolling. You might click on a section to expand it. but you don't have to scroll through a whole bunch of information to find what you're looking for. I'm going to go back to my Sam Adams because I know he's got stuff in here. I use him all the time. So I'm going to go back to Sam Adams. This is that student search shortcut I was talking about. Go back to student search, shortcut back to our student edit screen, student lookup screen. And so use my Sam Adams example for goals and outcomes. There we go. So we've got Sam's entire goal and outcome history available from prior fiscal years or currently entered information. We've got our non-NRS goals and outcomes, aka literacy zone goals and outcomes. And why I wanted to show you this one is it's a good demonstration of how the screen is going to expand the piece you want to look at and then shrink that back up when you go to look at the other sections of goals and outcomes. So rather than there being the multiple tabs across the top, now we have it more sort of visually right in your face and able to be found a little bit easier. Okay. The student's history works similarly in the sense that we've got each line can be edited with edit. You can add a new status necessary. But for this one, there's only one section of information, unlike the goals and outcomes. Last but not least, the case notes. The top section of case notes are the case notes that anybody can put in, anybody who has access to that student's record. So that could be a teacher, it could be a case manager, it could be a program manager, it could be whomever is working with that student and who has access to the student's record. These more categorized goals and outcomes, case notes, are specific to the case management portal. So those of you who have already either piloted the case management portal or have already started using it, you know that from within the case management portal, the students may have referrals made, or they may have a needs assessment done, or they may have a non-NRS outcome note put into their record. If that student has those put in via the case management portal, they're accessible here, but you'll notice that we don't have the ability to add or edit those records. We can only add or edit the records in the overall case section. So that's just a little nuance that exists in current assists, where there's the difference between the general case notes and the case management portal notes that have been entered. But here we've tried to make it sort of like that cascade so that you can see all the categories at once and look at the ones that you need. Okay. Amy, any questions in the chat for student information?
No, nothing specific to that. There was just a question if we were going to be receiving a PowerPoint with the information, but I know you're doing this as a demo, so I didn't know if there would be a PowerPoint at any point.
There is no PowerPoint.
Okay.
This is a demo off of our live alpha system. So I would rely on the recording for this for people who want to see this again.
Okay. That's all there's been. Otherwise, it was just about the sessions being recorded and where they can find them. So you're good to move on.
Right. Okay, thanks. Okay. So let me go back to adding a new student. The other change that we've made to adding a brand new student is that we have color-coded by the red fields. And we have made it so that you cannot move on from entering the ISRF if you are missing the information fields. So that is, you know, I have been a data entry person. I know for a fact that that is both a blessing and a curse. So those of you who are the data entry person for your agency, you might want to have some preemptive conversations before we release this new system, which we are, I did forget to mention, we are planning on releasing when the fiscal 2022 data has been frozen in August, and we're ready to fully be in fiscal 2023. So we're not going to make this change on you while you're trying to fix your reports. We're not, you know, our horrible, awful, cruel people. So we'll make this change after the reports are done, when we're moving on and doing data entry for the new fiscal year. We'll all get familiar with this. But it might be a good time to have a conversation with your intake people if some of these fields that are required for reporting come back to you as the data entry person blank. Because ultimately there will have to be a piece of information entered, and if it's missing, you know, ASISTS is not going to let you move on. So, you know, address, contact information, technically not required, so it's not labeled in red. Same thing with social security number, although if you don't put in a social security number, you are expected to put in the intake staff. We do need a gender. We do need an ethnicity. We need at least one race checked off, although it's not a check mark anymore. Now, once you've selected one, you have the opportunity to select additional of those racial identities if you need to for the student in question, but we need at least one, as has always been the case. We need an employment status for the current fiscal year. We need the student's history for education. And sometimes that answer is going to be not applicable. Sometimes it's going to be something from, you know, another country, or another, or maybe New York, you know, sorry, US, might be in New York, might not be in New York, might be in the US, not be in the US. Basically, we want as complete a picture of the student's educational background as possible. Parental information is still optional, but we do need to choose at least one barrier to learning, barrier to employment. And that can be a yes or a no, but we need to select at least one. And what you see is if we leave blanks where there is a red field, ASISTS is not going to let us get to the save entry piece until we've put something in that field. And as I said, sometimes that entry is going to be not applicable. It's not applicable to the student. They didn't attend school in New York State. That's fine. But because we need as complete history as possible, it's one of the fields that we need to fill out before we move on. Once we have saved that basic information, ASISTS is going to take you to the profile page. I didn't put in the contact information. We don't have any enrollments for her. We don't have any assessments yet for her. She's not counting on her reports. So you can see how what I put in is going to affect this profile page, and how these right-hand side pieces are certainly not ever going to be available for a brand new student, but as the student gathers information, those will be filled in. Okay. I think the piece that people are going to find most helpful is that potential duplicate student piece, which again, that was one of the things at the top of the list for changes that we wanted to make in this redesign. So as long as there's no questions on student entry, I'm going to move on to instructional activity. Here we have the ability to either add or edit a new instructional offering. If we wanted to add a new instructional offering, again, we have that interface where at the very top, we can click that and we get what in ASISTS right now, we give you a threshold screen, a brand new screen. Instead, we've put it right here on the lookup screen. So you could do that first step of data entry right on this first screen. But if you're looking up an existing class, then you can just filter by fiscal year by leaving the default and clicking apply filters. And ASISTS will give you all of the classes that are available for the current fiscal year. Or you can add additional filters. Instead of just type and primary instructor, we've also added format and level. So you can call up classes by these additional filters. But you can look up your current teacher's records. And so I have 2 records that Samantha Porter is, 2 classes that Samantha Porter is teaching this year. And again, we see that if we just highlight that and do click to edit, then we move into the fairly familiar enrollment screen. Each record can be clicked to edit if we need to edit that particular enrollment, or we can add a new student. And this is another place where we have tried to make this a little bit easier. First of all, we have made it so that you can filter by name and you can find the person who you're looking for. And we have defaulted the start date to the first day of the class. The start date of the students is defaulted to the start date of the class, so that if you are doing new enrollments, then it will be more difficult for you to put in a date that is incorrect. So hopefully you'll be able to avoid putting in an incorrect start date for that student. And certainly you can edit that if it is not correct to whatever the actual entry date is. So this screen works, fairly similarly to the enrollment screen. We've tried to streamline it a little bit. The contact hours screen has had some significant changes. We have tried to make this both more user-friendly from the perspective of the data entry people, but also for those of us who would be looking at this to do research on what's going on. The first thing I'll point out is that you'll notice that this box highlighted will default to the most recent previous month. So theoretically, you'd be doing data entry for, we're in May now, beginning of May, I would be doing my contact hours entry for April. And so ASISTS is going to start me on the April column at the top of my list so that I can do my data entry for April for the students who attended in April. And I can use my arrow keys to go up and down the fields. And add whatever hours I need to add, and ASISTS is going to tally those up as I go so that you'll see the overall total for that student for the whole fiscal year right at the right-hand side. And if I save that and refresh the screen, we'll see that the zeros get put in for those brand new students who just entered and who didn't have contact hours records in the system yet. The additional change that we've made is there are some agencies who use the instructional hours for their teachers and some that don't. We would encourage you to use it because ASISTS will take that information and actually give you some calculations for your average daily attendance without having to do daily contact hours entry. So it's a useful piece of information, but in ASISTS, it's always been sort of like hidden on a screen behind the contact hours screen. So it's an afterthought. So instead of it being an afterthought, what we are hoping is that by putting it right at the bottom of the screen, that we would be able to give you sort of an incentive to put that information in for the teacher for that month, and keep that information up to date, since it's going to be right there on the screen and it's easy to do. The other piece, and I will say this one's glitchy for me today, but we have modified the entry point into the daily contact hours input. And those of you who are familiar with doing daily contact hours entry, you know that there's a point at which you have to basically tell ASISTS, yes, I want to do daily contact hours entry, or that's the way I explain it when we're doing training. And it requires you to click the update roster button and then refresh the screen and et cetera, just to see the list of students who you want to do daily contact hours entry for. Instead of you having to do that, we have automated that process so that if you choose to do daily contact hours entry by clicking yes, I want to do that, ASISTS is going to go ahead and refresh that roster for you. It's going to add any students who have been enrolled in the class since the last time you went in to do daily contact hours entry, and provide a space for them to have their daily contact hours put in, and it will make sure that you've got all the students. So by clicking yes, I want to do that, ASISTS will go through that process for you, at which point you will select the month that you want to do daily contact hours for. And when you get your hands on this, you won't get this annoying little error that says, sorry, there was a problem, because we'll fix this. But I did want you to see that we've, tried to think through the places where there are currently roadblocks in ASISTS, and currently places that are not, they're not clear that that's what you're supposed to be doing, and made it so that you don't have to think about that so much. So that's our contact hours. And then last but not least, we're familiar with the details screen in ASISTS, where you've got all of the details about the instructional offering. And again, we've operated on the idea that we are moving everything important to the top, everything important to the above the fold, and everything that's less important to the bottom. And so at the top, we've got our key information about that instructional offering, which if you need to edit it, can be edited in the same way that we've seen throughout ASISTS. And you've got your funding source information, your start and end times. So those are going to be your key pieces of data that have to be put in order for a class to be valid for any of our funding reports. And then just below that, you have site information and special program information. So everything that is in either these top 3 sections or in what we're calling recommended items are the pieces of information that are on your program information form, or your PIF, that state ed is very interested in making sure that you have up to date, and where they require the site information, they require the projected enrollment, and we list for you any special programs, and that's all sort of the details on top of the pieces that you would have been filling out normally. So right now in ASISTS, you're, I'm sure at this point in the year, familiar with the fact that these few things, the site, the projected enrollment, and the special programs, these are all like way at the bottom. You have to scroll really far to get to all of those pieces. So we've moved them up to the top so that you don't have to scroll. And then everything else below those pieces is optional. It's certainly still there for you to put in the information if these are pieces that you need either for internal purposes or that you've always used. We're not going to take any of those away from you, but it's going to be sort of out of sight if you don't. Okay. All right. And we have, again, a shortcut back to our add or edit new instructional offerings. So we don't have to use our hamburger menu and our slide out menu if we're going straight to another class. We can just come to the add or edit new class function, and we can go back either back into the class we were talking about or into one of the other classes that we have for the current fiscal year. Other questions?
Yes, Kate, we have 2 questions. Lori wanted to know if there is any chance of a total for the monthly hours. And I think that was on a couple of screens ago, but that was her question.
Okay. I won't say that there isn't, but I'm certainly not the person who can tell me whether that's easy or hard or possible or not. So I will certainly put that on the list of things that we can look into.
And the second question was, will ASISTS allow for more than one funding source per class or for a class?
Yes. Yes. In my example, I happen to only have one, but it's the same rules apply. We haven't changed those rules. If it is appropriate to assign more than one funding source to a class, then you are able to do so.
Great.
Write down that total per month. Okay. All right. So the other pieces in ASISTS are our management and funding reports. And while we have these built locally, we haven't built it to this these screens yet, this place where I do testing, things like that. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and pull up some snapshots to share. Just get those queued up.
Okay, we do have one other question that just came in. I don't know if you want to address it now, but will there be improvements to pairing classes, and will there be filters available to find the pairing easier?
I'm assuming we're talking about the IET or IELCE pairing. And again, there haven't been any changes to that in this particular update to ASISTS. For the most part, most agencies have what they need at this point, but we can certainly think about what changes would be appropriate. Okay. All right, so what I have here is a snapshot of the management reports interface. This is one of the major changes that we wanted to make. In ASISTS currently, you have the management drop-down, management reports drop-down. You have multiple choices under that drop-down. You sometimes have multiple choices under those choices for management reports, and things are, I won't say they're categorized haphazardly, because they're not. There was intention behind where those reports were put when they were put there. But we're taking this opportunity to rethink the way that those reports are categorized and how we access. So what we have tried to do is make it so that you will, as you can see, sort of cascade through the choices that you need to make in order to run a management report. So we've got both selections for the various report groups, which I'll show you in a second. We're rethinking the reporting groups, and the ability to select the report you want from that group, as well as apply the filters or not apply the filters, depending upon whether you just want to run it as standard or add additional filters. So the possible choices for our management categories are being changed. Those of you who have been around for a long time will probably be very sad to learn that the words turnaround documents are being retired, and we will be categorizing our reports. Instead of having a whole group of data management reports or a whole group of turnaround documents or a group of I don't know, I'm blanking here, but we've tried to make the categories more user-friendly, more intuitive. And so you'll have a whole group of reports that are about assessment, a whole group of reports about case management, a whole group of reports about contact hours. And when a report touches multiple categories, we're going to list that report under multiple categories. So when you're looking for a report to say, I need to see the students' assessments for the year, you should be able to find it under assessment. If you're looking for something about contact hours, it should be under contact hours. If you're looking for something about exiting, it should be under the exiting and outcomes. So hopefully this will be a more intuitive way of listing the management reports, make them a little bit more easy to find, and not require you to remember what turnaround documents are or learn what turnaround documents are. If you're a brand new person, you'll be able to find those documents in, as I said, a more intuitive category. We have created the same type of cascading selection interface for the funding sources, for the funding reports. And so you will be able to select what fiscal year you want to run the report for, what group of reports. We're not making a lot of changes to the groupings of these reports because these are pretty well grouped as they are. But you'll have your group of reports, what reports are available from within that grouping. You'll be able to select the funding sources that you want to apply to those reports. And then if you want to add additional filters, you could add those filters. So instead of it being select the filters from the left-hand side of the screen and then select the report you want to run on the right-hand side of the screen, we're approaching it from the perspective of you're going to go in, you're going to select what report you want to run, and then apply the filters to that report, which you probably were doing anyway, but going from right to left instead of left to right wasn't immediately obvious to new users. So in this way, I hope we're sort of creating again, a more user-friendly, more intuitive way of running a funding report, applying the filters that we want to see, and getting ultimately what you want out of the system when you run the report at the end of the year. All right. So that was a lot. We have 15 minutes left for ideas, for questions, for comments, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. I've spent many years saying I am not ASISTS. So any negative feedback, that's okay. Positive Of course, we love negative. Let us know if there's something that you saw that you're like, not quite sure that's going to work. But let us know, and any ideas that you have. I can't guarantee that they're going to come out in our first iteration, but that's what we consider it. We consider it our first iteration, and there's always the possibility for additional features to be added after that. So let me know. And you can feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. Maybe raising your hand would be the best way, but whatever you want.
This is Lori. The reason that the total hours in the monthly attendance would be really helpful is because when a teacher submits the hard copy of their attendance, we can do a quick check to say, okay, my teacher says there should be 45 hours, but ASIST is only telling me there's 36. Have I done a data entry problem, or is there another thing I need to look for? That's why it would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can absolutely see the usefulness of it. And as I said, I'm just not the person who can tell you how difficult or easy that task would be. So I'm going to put it on our list of possibilities. And like I said, maybe it's not in the first iteration, maybe it's the second iteration. But I think that's a great idea. I see that we're looking for the new ISRF. Absolutely. We will get that out as soon as possible. I would say it will probably be when we are offline for maintenance at the end of this month, but I will check with powers that be and see if we can get that out to you sooner.
Okay, any other questions or feedback for Kate and the ASIST team? Kate, will a demo be available for practice before August, as you mentioned, for the start date of this?
Yeah, we're planning on doing a public beta test, not public like everybody, but a limited run beta test starting in June, and we will try and make it available more widely after that beta testing is done. So hopefully that would be like a July start date for people to sort of go in and poke around a little bit in our beta site before it goes live. So yeah, we're going to do our best to give you some time with it.
And I just want to remind you guys that, again, the sessions were all recorded today and are available on the Zoom platform. So if you wanted to share this presentation with your colleagues, you would just have to kind of, get them into the platform. And that's, from what I can tell, it's available for 7 days after today. So you'll have a little bit of access to Kate's demonstration between now and next week. And then I'm sure they'll be broadcasting quite a bit as the redesign launches later this summer. So if there's no other questions or comments, Kate, I just want to thank you. Like I said, I was really eager to see what changes were in place. I didn't know there were going to be changes. So when I saw the session title, I was very excited to see it. It definitely needed a refresh. And I do feel exactly like you said, it's a bit more intuitive and takes a lot of the kinks out of play. So I can't thank you enough for bringing this information to the conference today and for presenting later in the day also. So I know it's sometimes tough to hang on till the end, but I appreciate all of you guys attending. I just want to remind you to please complete your survey at the end of the session. And I really appreciate everybody's participation today. It was a great event, and we look forward to seeing everybody in person, hopefully next spring.
Yeah, and if anybody thinks of anything that it's not coming to mind now, but you think of something that would be really useful or a question you have about what we talked about today, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and I will do my best to get back to you with an answer, or like I said, add your idea to either our primary list or a secondary list for the future.
Great. Thank you again, Kate. And again, everybody have a great day. And it was good to connect with all of you, and hope to see you all soon.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, that was excellent. Thank you again. So excited
You're
to see
welcome.
some of the new stuff and give it a try, I suppose, right? It's the
Yeah.
it'll be nice. And
Yeah.
I'll let my team know also. I know they're just starting to use ASISTS, many of them. So it'll be nice, good timing for them to have a refresh. So
Great.
it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. As you can see, there's still a few hiccups. So we're trying
Yeah.
to get through that last 10%, and then we want to open it to some agencies to break it.
Yeah, and for us being the volunteer-based groups, it's always been a little bit of a disconnect with, classroom versus one-on-one, just in terms of reporting. But, those are things that are just inherent to kind of the style of our program. So it's really nothing that we can't work around. But I think, the more we get into it, the longer I do it, obviously the easier it becomes. And seeing these changes, I think, will make it easier for newer staff coming to the table. So it's great to see. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hope everything is well.
Yeah, just living the dream. So all right. Well, thank you again. And I'm sure we'll be in touch at some point.
Okay.
All right,
Take care.
Kate. Take care. Take
Bye-bye.
care now. Bye.